Welcome into the new year 2021. Today is Monday, January 4th, and the word comes from Jeremiah 17, verse 8, which reads, "For he will be like a tree planted by the waters that spreads its roots by the river, and will not fear the heat when it comes, but its leaves will be green and moist, and will not be anxious and concerned in the year of drought, nor stop bearing fruit." The thought from this message is, can you maintain fruit while you're in a drought? The scripture says that a tree planted by the rivers will not fear when the heat comes. We know that in droughts that there's a lot of heat and that there's a lack of water. So how can you maintain fruit, the spirit of the fruit, while you're in the middle of these hot times, these hard times where there's not any water? Well, we know that you must be planted or have deep roots. A tree that has deep roots has an easy access to a source of water. And in this case, I want to talk about the living water, which is Jesus Christ, who is the Word made flesh. In John chapter 4, verse 10, Jesus is telling the Samaritan woman that he is the living water, and anybody that drinks from him will no longer be thirsty. So let's think of this thought of the living water. That is how you maintain fruit in a drought, being connected to the Word, being connected to Jesus. So I'll throw another scripture out there, Psalm 1, verse 3, which says, "And he will be like a tree firmly planted and fed by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. Its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers and comes to maturity." So if you want to bear fruit and maintain that fruit in drought, make sure you are connected to the source of water. On to scoreboard watching, and starting with college basketball. Georgetown lost to Marquette 64-60. They were indeed back at Capital One Arena like I suspected last week, and they found their magic early, leading by 16 at the break. The Hoyas were even able to grow their lead to 18 about a minute into the second half, but their shots eventually stopped falling and they were outscored 44-22 for the remainder of the game. Next up, the Hoyas are back on the road to face Butler this Wednesday, January 6th at 7 p.m. As for Maryland, they had two games in the past week. Their first on December the 28th, they upset number 6 Wisconsin 70-64. The Terps shot 50% from the field and controlled the paint, which was an area of strength for Wisconsin entering the game. However, Maryland was not able to keep that momentum, as on New Year's Eve, they lost to 16th ranked Michigan 84-73. Maryland shot ridiculously from three-point range, hitting 13 of their 22 attempts, which is good for 59%. But ironically, they were outplayed in the paint by a team better known for their three-point shooting. Next up for Maryland, today they are in Indiana to face the Hoosiers, that game being at 8 p.m. The final week of the NFL's regular season and the playoffs were on the line. For the Baltimore Ravens, all they needed was to win, and they got it done, defeating the Cincinnati Bengals 38-3. Quarterback Lamar Jackson threw for only 113 yards, but he threw 3 touchdowns. One, a beautiful strike to Miles Boykin, showing that Lamar Jackson does have some passing touch. He's just a little bit inconsistent in that realm of the game. And he also had 2 touchdown throws to Marquise Hollywood Brown. I like that the Ravens have been getting him involved a little bit more. You know, weeks back he complained about being a soldier and not being involved in the game plan much, but I like that the Ravens have found a way to get him involved some more. Lamar did throw an interception, but that was on a ball batted at the line of scrimmage, so you can't really blame him too much for that. In the running game, Lamar Jackson was, of course, dangerous, running for 97 yards and becoming the first quarterback to eclipse 1,000 yards for consecutive seasons. The Ravens definitely had a concerted effort to get Lamar to the 1,000-yard mark. He entered the game only needing 82, and as I mentioned, he amassed 97. He was eventually replaced in the fourth quarter by third-string quarterback Taylor Huntley. I say third-string quarterback because Trace McSorley is the primary backup, but of course is out for the season with that mild sprain of his ACL. I mentioned how Lamar Jackson looked dangerous on the ground, but the story of this game was the Ravens' entire rushing attack, as they ran for a franchise record 404 yards, led by rookie J.K. Dobbins, who ran for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, breaking a rookie record for Ravens running backs, and that was a tongue twister right there. Another piece of good news was the fact that Mark Ingram only touching the ball 9 times, but he ran for 39 yards. This is good in my opinion because he was inactive the past couple weeks, but I think Baltimore was doing that so he could be fresh going into the playoffs. It's obviously good to have a veteran back and for him to have some rest. Defensively, although the Ravens didn't account for any sacks, they did get a lot of pressure on Cincinnati's quarterback Brandon Allen, and they had 2 interceptions, one by Chuck Clark and another by Marcus Peters in the end zone. Another good point of emphasis defensively was the fact that they only allowed 195 total yards. Compare that to Baltimore's 525 total yards, and you see just how good of a game it was defensively for the Ravens. Of course, it was just the Bengals, and as I've mentioned the past few weeks, this 5-game winning streak for them has come against not the best competition, but either way, the Baltimore Ravens are in the playoffs, and they will have the opportunity to exercise some demons. This Sunday at 1 p.m., they face the Tennessee Titans, who of course knocked them out of the playoffs last year and defeated them in overtime this season. The 7-9 Washington football team is heading to the playoffs as the NFC East division champions. This comes after defeating the Philadelphia Eagles 20-14. For a season that had a lot of drama and storylines, from 3 different starting quarterbacks, a coach battling cancer, a name change, drama with the owner, and everything in between, exceeding expectations from a 3-13 season last year. Obviously 7-9 isn't great, but it's enough to make the playoffs, and anything can happen. As for the game itself, Alex Smith threw for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns in his return from the calf strain. The first touchdown was a strike to Terry McLaurin in the corner of the end zone, and the second was this ridiculous grab by Logan Thomas, who used every bit of his 6'6" frame to grab the ball and give Washington a lead, which they would not relinquish. Overall, I didn't think Alex Smith looked too healthy. He had the 2 interceptions. The second one wasn't entirely his fault. As you can see here, it was just a really ridiculous athletic play by the Eagles defender. But Alex Smith was sacked 3 times, and that wasn't really because Philly did a great job pressuring him. That was really just because Alex Smith is immobile dealing with that calf injury. So that really brings me to question whether Alex Smith is the best opportunity for us in this playoff game against Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers are ranked 5th or 6th in team sacks, so you really can't afford having a quarterback that's immobile. Before the game, Alex Smith's wife, Elizabeth, presented him with this memento, a trophy made out of his leg brace. And I think that, this is the perfect metaphor for what Alex Smith has done this season. I think he can look at finishing the regular season as his championship, and Washington can move forward with their best opportunity. Alex Smith is obviously a game manager, known for not turning the ball over, but he has 8 interceptions on the season. And with that lack of mobility, facing a really good pass rush from the Buccaneers, I think Tyler Heineke gives them the best opportunity. Offensively, they did just enough to get the job done. They ran for 103 total yards, with Antonio Gibson leading them with 75 yards in his second game back from turf toe. But of course, when it comes to Washington, most of their games are won defensively, and that again was the case here. John Bostic had a sack, Montez Sweat had a sack, as well as knocking the ball loose on a bad snap, which was recovered by Chase Young, who also had a sack. They also accounted for 2 interceptions, one by Cam Curl and one by Jeremy Reeves. The real story of the game kind of focuses around some Eagles decision making. The first was a failed 4th and goal attempt, which the Eagles could have just kicked the field goal and tied the game at 17. Instead, they failed to convert, and Washington would not relinquish the lead. The second was Doug Peterson, Phillies head coach, sitting Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was 7 for 20 with 72 yards and an interception, but it was more than just the stats for him. He ran for 34 yards and 2 touchdowns, but overall, he really had the Eagles offense going. And once Doug Peterson put Nate Sudfeld in the game in the 4th quarter, just trailing by 3, it was a completely different story, and Washington was able to come away with the victory. Washington's wild card opponent will be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this Saturday at 8:15 p.m. And if you want to know how they're feeling about this game, just ask what Chase Young is looking forward to.
Tom Brady, I'm coming. I want Tom.
As for me, what I'm looking forward to is Washington possibly wearing burgundy and gold. They like going with different uniform combinations for big games. They're 3-0 wearing the all-white uniforms this season, and I think this is the perfect opportunity to break out the burgundy on gold. The Washington Wizards are now 2-5. After last week's video, they were 0-3, so you can see they have 2 wins and 2 more losses now. Those 2 losses came to the Chicago Bulls, but that was in 2020. The Washington Wizards are undefeated on the year 2021. That comes after victories over the Minnesota Timberwolves and a 1-point victory over the Brooklyn Nets last night. Russell Westbrook didn't play in the game against Minnesota due to rest, but he was back against Brooklyn, and he snapped his triple-double streak. He had 4 consecutive triple-doubles to start the season, but did not get one last night against the Nets, but he did have a double-double, including going off in the 4th quarter. The Wizards definitely needed that, as Bradley Beal only had 1 bucket in the final half of the game against the Nets. But Bradley Beal is still averaging 30 points a game, which is good for 3rd best in the league, as well as 5 assists and just about 5 rebounds. The story for the 2 stars is that they're now taking care of the ball. Bradley Beal, after having 11 turnovers in his first 2 games combined, is only averaging about a turnover and a half a game. As for Russell Westbrook, he had 5 turnovers against the Chicago Bulls, but he did only have 2 turnovers last night as a part of the Wizards' 7-turnover game. For comparison, Brooklyn had 20 turnovers, so I think that's a key stat in last night's game. And Washington was able to come away with the victory thanks to not only Kyrie Irving missing a last-second shot, but Kevin Durant missing a shot on their final possession. More storylines for the Wizards include the return of Rui Hachimora. The second-year forward missed the first 4 games of the season due to conjunctivitis, but in his last 3 games is averaging 14.8 points per game. That includes 40% from beyond the 3-point line, but that's mostly because he went 3 for 3 against the Chicago Bulls before not attempting a 3-point shot against Minnesota and missing all of his 3-point attempts against Brooklyn. But the main thing for Hachimura is he's allowed Scott Brooks to have some better rotations, and he's been offering the Wizards a mismatch in the paint. Speaking of paint mismatches, it's been a tremendous tear for Thomas Bryant. The center has scored 28, 18, and 21 points respectively, while shooting 86% from the floor. That is 100% in his first game, the 28-point game, then only missing one shot in his 18-point game before missing 3 shots last night against Brooklyn. But he did have the game-saving rebound and the game-winning dunk. Next up for the Wizards, they will be back in Philadelphia to take on the 76ers this Wednesday, January 6th at 7 p.m. In some surprise hockey news, the Washington Capitals signed defenseman Zdeno Chara to a 1-year, $795,000 contract. The 6'9", 43-year-old Chara spent 14 seasons as a captain with the Boston Bruins, and now coming to Washington offers them a pretty good shot blocker in front of the net and a really good veteran presence on their blue line. That's everything I have for today's episode of What's the Word. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.